supposed to be all doing one thing at this point in time, I don't know. But so many wonderful familiar faces from Faculty Row. Okay, let's see if I can get this to play and it'll just loop.
What year was that?
This was probably 77 or 78. Moana Street, otherwise known as Faculty Row or Howley Street, was not a street at all when construction began on the first homes. According to President Sione Fenga, a labor missionary who worked on the construction of those homes and who's also a retired BYUH physical plant director, that entire area from Kulanui to Kamehameha Highway was agricultural land, mostly sugarcane, before the construction began. There was no Laie Stake Center crowning the street. There was no street. The road itself was cut out after the homes were constructed and the stake center after that. According to President Fenga, the idea for this faculty housing emerged from the realization that after building the dormitories, the church had enough wood to form, frame, and roof approximately 16 houses. So the labor missionaries went from building dorms to building homes. And what homes they were. They were some of the first cinder block homes in a community of wooden homes. They had large rooms, concrete driveways, attached garages, and people came from all over the island to see this impressive new housing development after they were built in 1961 to 62. The last 5 or 6 faculty houses on the street were built by contractor Joe Wilson, who paid his employees, including former labor missionary Sione Fenga, who had built the first 16 homes for free. Besides the prudent use of excess resources, one has to wonder what other rationale went into the planning of this project. Many of the earliest Howley faculty members built and would build and own their own homes, like the Coburns, the Swaps, and the Daltons, to name a few. When was it decided that faculty rentals were a necessity, and by whom? Did the decision makers consider the ramifications of putting such a large proportion of faculty in one neighborhood? Big cities have their Chinatowns and their Little Italies and other cultural enclaves, but these usually spring up organically. This one was designed, if inadvertently. I wonder if anyone at the outset wondered what the results might be of moving so many predominantly Howley and almost all from someplace else PhD families into one neighborhood in an otherwise culturally diverse town. Was the fact that they were rental units a signal that these families were not expected to become long-term residents? The homes were much more luxurious and better constructed than almost all the homes in town at the time. One has to wonder if any of the administrators of the university or the church spent any time ruminating on what might result from this arrangement. Our family moved to Hawaii in 1973 and moved right into a wood frame house at 55443 Naniloa Loop. Only the oldest children remember much of our time in that house. Just 2 years later, in 1975, we moved on to Moana Street, and our family remained there for the next 28 years, making us one of the longest-lasting Moana families. It wasn't until we grew up and moved away that we realized what a unique niche Moana Street was. President Gordon B. Hinckley has said of our town of Laie, "The marvelous thing is that this place is unique in all the world. We don't have any place else what we have in Laie, where we have the beautiful temple, the magnificent school, and this wonderful Polynesian Cultural Center. This is the only place in the world where we have this kind of triad." Similar words could be said of Moana Street with its triad of transplanted renters, PhDs, and temple recommends. Although there's faculty housing on Pu'uahi Street, on Upper Yosepa, on Polikana Street, on that street behind Laie School, whose name I still don't know, and in the townhouses, Moana Street was the first and remains the longest-lived faculty housing enclave. Unique is just one word to describe the experience of growing up on Moana Street. The distance of years has allowed many Moana Street alumni to think of other words to evaluate the experience. Some memories are glowingly positive, some are less so. One pronouncement came from a lifelong Laie resident, also a child of CCH BYUH faculty, who did not grow up on Moana but on Naniloa Loop, in the same ward as half of the Moana Streeters. When I told him we were thinking about writing this paper, it emerged in our conversation that in his opinion, everyone knew that Naniloa was a cooler street, a more prestigious address. When I protested, he couldn't accept that I was being serious. You know, right? I mean, you know how it was. The truth is that I honestly didn't really understand what he meant, especially not as a child. And he's certainly not the only one with less than positive impressions of Moana Street. Just the other night, the wife of a current faculty member told me that after living on Moana Street for a while, they decided to move away because their kids were getting weird. So partly this paper has to serve as a defense of Moana Street, the less sophisticated street that produces weirdos. The inherent risk is that our presentation will instead prove that those opinions are entirely accurate. While external perspectives of Moana Street are interesting, if sometimes vexing, this paper does not address those. Instead, this paper highlights and records the first-person memories of those who spent their growing up years on Moana Street between 1975 and 2000. At first, we thought we would study the situation of housing, looking at rents, the physical structures, the adult faculty experience of living in the houses. And we were greatly assisted in that initial focus by the careful record-keeping of Cecilia Day, who served first as faculty housing assistant and later as chair of the faculty housing committee. Her personal journal did double duty as a record of the politics and personalities and transactions between faculty families and physical plant and the campus business manager. But as we went looking for records besides Cecilia's journal, we ran into a dead end. The archives had no pictures of Moana Street during its construction, although I saw one in Kathy's presentation today. We were unable to find records on the work done, the rents paid and received, the property values, and decided we were more interested anyway in the effect of all that building, maintenance, rent charging and paying on the most impressionable residents of Moana Street, the children. There were a lot of them. We offer 1990 as an example. To the best of our recollection, there were approximately 125 children residing on Lower Moana Street that year. We gathered all our information via Facebook and email. We created a survey of questions, turned it into a Google Doc, tagged all the Moana Street alumni on our friends list, and begged them to fill out the survey and submit it. We asked them to ask their friends and siblings to do it too. After receiving the responses, we looked for patterns, outliers, and vivid imagery. We came up with our areas of emphasis based on the themes that emerged from the responses. In all, 24 people responded to our questions. Only 6 of them were male, 18 were female. Their average time spent living on Moana Street was 14.2 years. Average family size was 6.4 children. 17 of our respondents lived on the 2nd ward side of the street, and 7 of them on the 5th ward side. The earliest residents represented in our survey moved there in 1973. The latest resident moved into Moana in 1986. The family that lived on Moana Street the longest has lived there for over 40 years in the home they built. The longest term renters lived there for 31 years. In all, 17 different families are represented by our respondents. Of course, there are drawbacks to our methodology. Respondents are all people who use Facebook and who are amenable to requests from Elizabeth Chase Maycock and Ann Chase Workman. 24 total respondents is a small proportion of those who lived on Moana Street during the 25-year period we're talking about. Further, our survey was not vetted by experts in any field. We asked questions about address and family size. In addition to general memories, we asked about friendships, how Moana Street shaped the outlook, education, religious activity, occupation, and views on race and culture. It asked about school experiences, how kids felt about being faculty children, and for the name of the one person that stood out among all their memories. What emerges is a kind of panel discussion on paper of what came about because we grew up on Moana Street. As I've worked on this project, I've come to feel that this paper in substance is most like a love letter. Not a wooing or a courting love letter, but more like a letter written by a spouse on a 40th anniversary, full of shared gold-tinged memories, a rueful remembrance of hard times overcome, and gratitude for all of it. And why should this love letter to Moana Street have a place in the history of Laie? In the words of one resident, Kim Elcock Brown, I feel like my entire life has been framed by what became important to me living in Laie on Moana Street, and that the relationships I made there are the most authentic friends I have in my life. The most dominant theme to emerge, which appeared in every response, was that Moana Street was a glorious place to grow up. Essie, would you read number 1? And say the name of the person after, please.
It really was a kid's playground, and I loved that. Shannon Curran.
Okay. Winnie, could you read number 2 for us?
Growing up on Moana Street was such a privilege. It is unique to have friends and surrounding who are all products of educated parents, who are all educators, and who are all members of your same church. Our values were so similar that it made it easy to be together. We were all in the same situation, non-locals. We were far from our extended families, growing up in a culturally rich environment, which was wonderful and sometimes difficult at the same time. The family stuck together and helped each other out and acted as extended family one towards another. This bond has shaped my outlook on life and the kind of person and friend I am. Being the youngest of 6, I was always tagging along with my older siblings and their friends. Still to this day, I don't just miss the individual kids who are my age who grew up on Moana Street. I miss them and their entire families, because we are all so in and out of everybody's homes growing up. Amy Smith Rodriguez.
My childhood was very happy there on Moana Street. It was full of sunshine, lots of friends, and never-ending play. That's a great thing to build your life on. Melanie Smith Kongaika. Reina, 4, please.
It taught me confidence and independence. I could get myself almost anywhere I needed to go as a kid, and I had so much freedom. It also made me feel connected to other families since we knew each other so well. Jenny Smith Black.
Etsy, would you read number 5?
I think because of growing up in Laie, I have never been concerned about wearing the latest clothes or having the newest car. Nobody cared about those things then, and so I still don't. People are what matter most, and you can make your own fun without expensive gadgets, putting your kids in organized sports, or scheduling their lives. Nicole Smith Sill.
I love the freedom and independence we had at a young age. Growing up on Moana Street, there was never a shortage of friends. Allison Ward Gunter. Winnie, can you read 7 for us?
I had an amazing, sheltered upbringing. The spirit was strong in so many of the homes. Jen Jackson.
Growing up on Moana Street made me believe there was so much imagination and belief that anything you could dream up could come true. Jared Uehara. It helped me to see that many cultures could come together to form one culture, a culture of love and concern for one another and having fun. I learned to just relax and enjoy the simple things in life. Adam Christian.
Our family loved living where we did, and I've always felt grateful for the very happy childhood memories I have. They are a treasure to me. Melanie Smith Kongaika. While Moana Street, for the most part, was an idyllic and ideal place for young people to grow up, Moana Street kids certainly experienced things that troubled and disturbed their otherwise sunny childhood. I also remember tsunami drills and a guy driving a Jeep up and down the street and firing a gun at the church. We also had a couple of high-speed chases go through Laie. Those were exciting. There was a lot of petty crime, at least where my family was involved. We were burgled and broken into many, many times, more often than I have ever been a victim of crime as an adult. We also had frequent peeping Toms. There were at least 2 that I know of on several occasions. One was confronted in the act by my brothers. When we had our windows open, a must in humid Hawaii weather without air conditioning, as girls, we were worried about who was looking at us through them. Elizabeth Chase Maycock. Winnie 313.
Flash floods and hurricanes. Jen Jackson.
I remember the floods would come from time to time. We would play in the water and have a great time, despite the minor disaster of a flood. Adam Christian.
I remember being aware that men in our ward were organized into a neighborhood watch to patrol the streets during the overnight hours. They would go out 2 by 2, and I wasn't sure exactly which kinds of criminals they were worried about. I just knew my neighborhood wasn't safe. I also remember hearing that our church meetings were scheduled in such a way that one half of Moana Street was always at home to keep watch on the other half of the street during church to prevent burglary and chase workmen.
We did have one really frightening experience that shows another side of Laie. A man who was probably on drugs broke into a house in the middle of the night and attacked my sister. She was being strangled in her bed. Some of us in the house woke up and called out to her to see what was wrong, and he immediately left. So as carefree and wonderful as Moana Street was, there were always pockets of scary things happening in other parts of Laie. We were definitely aware that there were dangers out there. In fact, the alleyway behind our house seemed like the place for a lot of mischief. Melanie Smith Kongaika.
The other main difficulty that everyone in the survey mentioned was one of racial tension. It was challenging to be Haole.
Quite frankly, I struggled finding my identity in a multicultural environment when I first arrived in Hawaii. Adam Christian.
Brandon, could you read 18?
Growing up in Hawaii, my parents were adamant that we not use pidgin in the home, only proper English. They were wise for that rule, but I hated it at the time. Have a good one.
Strangely, I felt like being Haole meant that I didn't have a legitimate cultural heritage. It was never represented at May Day or in cultural nights, perhaps because the origins were so long ago and they had been diluted in Mormon identity. I always wished I could have darker hair, darker skin, because I knew I was so far outside that there was considered beautiful by my classmates. It was also a foregone conclusion that I would not be any good at sports and would always be picked last for the teams. Possibly that would have been true anywhere, but I internalized very early that I should stick to doing well in academics. Liesl Smith,
Yeah. In hindsight, it was a challenge for me, particularly as a teenager. I don't know that the same acceptance was expected for Haole heritage as it was for Islander heritage. I was often given compliments akin to, quote, "Oh, you're so chocolate on the inside," unquote, which, while assuredly well-intended, nonetheless sent the message that my goodness and my good choices weren't because of my parents or my family or the heritage of my ancestors, but because of the influence of the Islanders on me. I felt that I had to become less Caucasian to be more deeply accepted. It was confusing at times. Lisa Walker Dancy. Could you read 23, Brother Robertson?
I think in an attempt to be shown acceptance, I was told I wasn't Haole, but I was. Ben Chase.
And we're going to skip. Along with the frank recollections of racial discrimination came clear expressions of valuable lessons learned from the experience. It's you again.
I felt less than being Haole. I think these views, feelings have changed since I have grown up and moved away. Now I use growing up on Moana Street as a point of pride to connect to others who may be from or familiar with Laie. Ben Chase. At first it baffled me. I didn't really respect the other cultures or understand the motivations of those who weren't like me. I was a recent transplant from the mainland and everything was new. Eventually I got it and embraced it. Being a Laie kid and a Kahuku grad is still a pretty big part of my life. David Baker.
Yep. 28, Essie, please.
I love growing up in a multi-racial community. I love the Hawaiian culture so much. I wanted to literally be Hawaiian. I would tell people that I was albino Hawaiian. I had friends of all cultures. Cindy Harvey.
Winnie, will you read Kyla's 30?
growing up in a melting pot of different races has made me a more accepting person as a whole. I don't see a person's race when I meet them. I see them as they are and as an individual and the culture they come from. To me, the color of a person's skin or their physical features are no different than the color of their clothing. Red shirt, blue shirt, brown skin, white skin. They're all adjectives and not an indicator of what lies within a being. Kyle Graham.
The last one, 34. It was such a blessing to be surrounded by people from different cultures and backgrounds. I learned how it feels to be a minority, which is a valuable perspective to gain. Jenny Smith Black. So short on time. Many respondents also talked about how growing up on Moana Street influenced their spiritual and religious views. Learning to do well in their callings, accept callings, and serve faithfully, feeling close to the members of the ward, were all a part of that. Kim Elcock Brown said, I account my testimony to my time in Laie. How can someone fall away after hearing testimony from the Laie second pulpit and the sound of the members singing there? Turning the page, for many kids, growing up on Moana Street was so wonderful, so unique, that it was hard to accept living anywhere else. Number 49, because we were so isolated from family, we relied on one another. I realized what a unique bond that was when I moved away and friends did not have the same sense of loyalty, duty, or bond to help each other. My definition of friend was more like that of family. There's nothing you wouldn't do for each other. I grew up with the mentality that if someone needed your help, you gave it. You didn't worry or think about how it might inconvenience you or whether they really deserved your help, etc. If someone asked you to make an airport run at midnight, you wouldn't hesitate. When I moved to the mainland, it was a big reality check. Friends weren't as loyal to one another as my friends on Moana Street. I had taken that for granted. Amy Smith Rodriguez. It shouldn't be surprising that on a street of professors and other educational professionals, kids would grow up convinced of the importance of education. To be like the Savior, we need to learn, create, and serve, just like I saw all the adults and families on Moana Street do. And I love that all the adults, women included, were interesting people. I live now in an area that people are considered upwardly mobile and financially successful, but I think they are nowhere near as interesting as the people I grew up with. Just the variation of subject matter experts on our street was such a privilege to grow up around. I assumed all adults were like that. Not so. Elizabeth Chase Maycock. Brother Robertson, please, 51.
Some very talented and respected professors lived on Moana Street, and their example and love of learning inspired me to want to do well in school. I think living on Moana Street introduced me to people with a wide variety of backgrounds. Brother Ferry in drama, Brother Porter in sports and tennis, Brother Wingett and my father in the sciences, with Brother Rathall on the other corner doing his astro thing. Brother Tolotai and his incredible art skills. There was such a wide variety of occupations and talents that I knew I could expand my horizons, try things out. Eric Ova.
Being a faculty kid gave me a lot of confidence. There were probably more than a few people who would have liked to knock that confidence down a notch or two. I like to think I've mellowed and matured and am less obnoxious now. Skipping the page, the women of Moana Street emerged in many responses as exemplary, heroic in their faithfulness, their intelligence, and their ability to multitask. I believed I wanted to be a committed, driven, intelligent Mormon woman because of the women I grew up around. They were pretty haggard moms, but also smart and driven, trying to be the best moms they could be, but also finding fulfillment outside their homes. I really admired the strong LDS women I was privileged to be raised by. Ann Chase Workman. Raina, will you read 70?
The women on Moana Street were sharp. Many had degrees, some worked part-time in their specialties, others were full-fledged professors, and many were working on earning their degrees while balancing life. Just by example, they left no doubt that girls get degrees. My sisters both went on to earn master's degrees. One of my brothers is a medical doctor, and the other two earned their MBAs, so I guess the same message was instilled in the boys. Lisa Walker.
The picture that may remain might consist of snapshots like these, and I'm going to have to cut 90% of it out. A great childhood, twilight, kick the can, toilet papering, playing in the giant rain puddle between our house and Punaki, sitting on the curb talking story as teens, walking around the block to Christmas Carol, hearing the Kahuku marching band practice on the BYU field, hearing the campus chime the hours, going to Seasider basketball games, choirs, BYU Children's Choir, ward choirs, youth choirs. David Porter was always cheerful, and he came home from work on roller skates. Sister Graham, a truly vivacious woman. Lance Chase picking up rubbish on Cam Highway. Londa Chase, she cooked homemade dinner all the time. Playing basketball in someone's driveway or hockey at the Walker's house. Sometimes Zorro would make an appearance, and we would all go try and find him. We used to play in a huge banyan tree, fishing down the drain grates in the alley behind my house for catfish. We put on small plays or shows for their neighborhood kids where we lip sync to music from the Osmonds. Riding our bikes up and down our street and going to the snack bar to get ice cream. I could write a book about this. Playing in the rain, especially in the gutters, putting together performances, swimming at BYU pool, being chased home from school by the Ohlers dog, Duke, Brother Dalton yelling at us to stop riding our bikes on campus, BYU musicals, and so much more. In closing, it's possible that any group of children would feel similarly about their childhood neighborhood. But Moana Street alumni don't buy that. As Kyla Graham says,
growing up on Moana Street exposed me to experiences that I now realize were unique and special. Not everyone had the opportunities to do what we did. I grew up learning how to be charitable and kind and developed a true sense of community because of Moana Street. I have taken those attributes with me wherever I have lived and worked, and I feel blessed to have been a Moana Street kid.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
You didn't mention Halloween.
It was in there. I just had to skip around. Tons of people mentioned the overwhelming hordes on Halloween.
We lived on Nanilua Loop and our kid played with Moana kids. But I came home one day with a new set of glasses, partnering glasses, and Jeffrey said to me, "Ooh, Dad, you look like one of those Howley guys on Moana Street."
Jeff was quoted in this paper.
Well, actually, in reality, we have the best of all streets, and that's Moana Street. Yep.
Yeah, I shouldn't have even opened that can of worms. Any other comments, questions?
Did you, when you got all these responses, did you ever look at one and say, you gotta be kidding?
Yeah.
Was there, I mean, did you ever feel like people were saying what they're supposed to say? Or there's
Well,
a
I
kind of
guess
a
we
set-
have no way of weeding out, you know, and I think probably if we asked these same people 6 months from now, the answers would be a tiny bit different. None of these kids live here now, they all live away, and so the tendency, I think for all of us looking back, is to have, you know, for things to be a little sunny and gold tinged in our memories. There were some responses that I said, "Are you kidding me?" But that my job was to include and
Sure.
look for patterns,
Sure.
so I put them in.
That's history as we wanted it to be.
Yes, yes. Holly,
So I'm moving to Moana Street,
watch
but
out.
the light side of Moana Street, right?
Yeah, that's
So
right.
maybe you can reflect on the fact that you're having this talk on that side of Moana Street,
Yeah.
in the absence of the dark side. With Star Wars coming up.
With Star Wars coming up. I think, you know, the reason that the paper is like it is, and actually Jeff Shumway said, how are you gonna talk about only that part of Moana Street? How are you doing that? And the truth is that that's just the enclave. We identified as, you know, this is Moana Street. And there's lots more of Moana Street going on up. There's much more of Moana Street going up. But as children, you know how it is. When you're really little, that's your whole world. We heard about the other streets, you know. We knew some of them. But that was our whole world. And I think that's kind of reflected in this. You can see that that's what we thought the whole world was.
Yeah, I was recently talking to Quinn Courage, whose mug is up there, so I just texted him. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Captain of Moana Street.
Your talk really captures that sentiment
Yeah.
of being an enclave and
Yeah.
feeling like Oregon.
Yeah.
They all say it's unique though. When they look back, they just say, it was just so unique.
Yeah.
It's just so different, and how they took it for granted, but looking back, it was just the best
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, yeah, and all of these,
They
I
all
mean,
say that.
even among people, you know, we have Harvard graduates and doctors and very successful and well-educated people represented in this survey. But even among those who are not as successful by the world standards, who might have cause to say, I hated that darn place, there were golden memories. Golden memories. Even, I was surprised, some of them like you, who? He said this about Moana Street? They were all golden. I haven't found someone who expresses
Well,
dissatisfaction with growing up on Moana Street.
I still live on that street, and the thing that is amazing to me is how many little young people come through and said, "Oh, I lived here. Could I please just go through the backyard?" I mean, the strangest people just come, "I lived here. Could I just take a picture of the house?"
Yeah.
Over and over.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Thank you so much for your questions and comments.